A very valid question indeed, because we have been at this at least for 3 years. The last thing we need is to get to a 5-year period and we look back only to find that we haven't made any difference. What we then implemented as the institute is like a 3-level system of assessing whether we're making progress. The very highest state is at the organization, where we run what we call professional health indexes. And that is very much based on the feedback from members and our stakeholders and our users on the services that we provide them and the changes that we have made. As much as it's perception-based, but we do rely on it because we will know that our efforts are making a difference if they're making a difference to the people that they are intended for. So if our member satisfaction index is not satisfactory or is not where we expect it to be, then we know all these interventions mean nothing to our members. So at an organizational level, we use the health index. At the next level, internally, we assess ourselves in terms of outputs on whether we are actually producing things that will make a difference and will move the dial when it comes to the member experience and the stakeholder experience. And then obviously at an individual level, we measure the effort of what people have contributed towards the output. So we basically have 3 different ways of measuring whether we are making a difference. Most of all informed by external feedback.
On the board, it's open now. We are attracting new members, non-members, to one of the seats. On our think tank, the council, which has been established to publish reports on public value, it's 2 out of 7 at the moment. And I think that will stay that way.
As I said in my brief comments, I think we have to be careful about diversification as a panacea unless that's genuinely going to be sustainable and meet a market need that isn't being met elsewhere, or it has to play to your core competence. So that's one thing to say. I'd also, sorry, I'm sounding a bit, I'll give some solutions in a moment, but I'd also caution against moving it away from being what we are at heart, which is membership organisations. And we have to, I think I have seen examples where moving too quickly away from that can, lose the engagement of that membership. And I talked about the strategic focus earlier that we employed at ACCA, and top and central was member support and retention, because I think keep, in broad commercial terms, keeping your customers at this time is really critical to that sustainability piece. So I just really think we need to focus on that. That having been said, I do think the area around continuous learning and upskilling and the new modes of education and training that governments are looking for in many parts of the world does provide a huge opportunity for diversification in terms of what can be offered. And quite often the brand of the professional body and the certification that can be applied from our various organisations lends a credibility to that upskilling and training that others might not be able to deliver. So it does require, I think that requires the partnerships I mentioned. I think it requires funding being made available to make that investment, which does come back as well as, simultaneously looking at cost within the organisation and fundamental reviews. And I think, I'll be surprised if there's anybody on this call who isn't doing this at the moment. Fundamental reviews of operating models, how it is that your strategic outcomes are going to be delivered, how you're going to measure that success. All of that can release the capacity to invest in those kinds of opportunities.
So I'm probably going to be on the more aggressive side than what Helen just advised on the being, she didn't say careful, but thinking through it, and probably somewhere in between that sort of continuum is where most people need to be. I think that the mathematical reality is that to the extent that you have a high dependence on subscriptions, dues, and exam revenues, if that's the primary income drivers, those are going to be very inelastic revenue streams. Yes, you can grow membership, and it is a great annuity, as Helen said, that is, sort of what we are, what our core business is. And so it is a very important part. But it will never free up sufficient resources to make the types of investments. And Robert, I think, alluded to some of that as well with the types of investments that they're doing. I mean, he had audit on that. We have a totally reinvent the audit project in which we raised $40 million outside of the traditional models. I think if I had to build the perfect professional body, whether it's in our profession or any other profession, I would say the target should be no more than 50% of your revenue from the traditional models, and that you have to have those other revenue streams if you're going to have the freedom of resources in order to be able to be agile, all the things that we've been talking about. We own a series of entities. We do a whole lot of things in the commerce space. I agree that learning, as Helen said, is an opportunity. However, it's highly competitive. And so you need to be able to do that in a way that you can act competitively. And I think our traditional models, and again, I'll go back to the NBA example, the traditional models probably don't lend that as much. It has to be much more, frankly, executive led. It has to be more business people led, et cetera, than sort of thinking about it in the context of profession or professional firms and the like. We're highly diversified. We're not diversified enough. We are still slightly above 50%. Pandemic did, from a top line perspective, increase our percentage as it relates to dues/subscriptions because some of those programs were curtailed in a pandemic world. And so our percentage moved in a way that is very concerning to me. And we have a major objective to bring that back into what I would call the right equilibrium, which is approximately 50-50. But that means you have to be in certain business areas. You obviously have to be cognizant of not competing with members. You have to find ways to produce revenue and business models that support members, but they are out there.
Here in Mongolia, most of our members are middle-aged, or the average age is like 40 or 45. So we really need to attract more younger generation. That's why we are slightly changing our enrollment or membership regulations. Because as of now, we requires people first to accomplish a certain work experience, then you have to start taking your exams, and then you have to accomplish a certain qualification, and then this roadmap is quite long. So we kind of make this roadmap flexible to attract more younger generation. For instance, we are allowing to take students to take exam while they are in last year of their study, or maybe they're just starting from the starting their work, and they were able to take CPA examination, such that we can attract more younger generation. Otherwise, for instance, after the students graduated, they have to wait for 2 or 4 years to take starting the exams in our case. So we are kind of make this road more flexible to attract younger generation.
We nearly stopped with just putting out advertisements. That's not how it works anymore, obviously. The best colleagues now coming in my own department, for example, are those which we have already connection with through one of my colleagues. so they are familiar with the new colleagues coming in. That also means that they are most time experienced colleagues. They are not in their 20s, so that's a problem because we don't have really young people in the policy functions. And sometimes you would like to have it, but the other part, if I look to my colleagues of the communication department, which also take care for example, for the campaign Becoming an Accountant, they do have younger colleagues, especially if it comes to the use of social media and organizing an impact challenge for schoolers from high school or from college. So if it comes to policy in my department, if it comes to the knowledge of accountants itself, it is still the elderly colleagues interesting to do something for the profession, and they only come by inviting them through personal networks.
I thought Kevin's terminology of it's a greatest opportunity, but it's going to be competitive. So I would say my terminology is it's ours to lose, but it's no guarantee we will win. And I think how do you guarantee, I think is the word you use, Joseph, on that we have the right people. I think there's no guarantee on that. We can't be perfect. I think my line is the pursuit of perfection is the enemy of progress. We just have to move. We have to be agile. We have to continue to change. And I think that we have to, really understand the opportunity and be willing to admit where the skill set gap is in our profession and fill it. And it will be filled, for instance, in firms, it will be filled in many instances by non-accountants, but where, or in corporates, there will be non-accountants in the finance functions that may be involved in it. And we have to be okay with that. And I think where our emphasis is the reliability, the control structures, the presentation, the consistency, and which all revolves around the assurance and the reporting of information. I think you have to hire for it, though. And I think as professional bodies, we have to, back to the opportunities of non-membership revenue, the training that Helen mentioned, I think you have to really be pushing and probably making an investment in training members, existing members, mid-career members in this space very dramatically, which may not all be profitable because they may not, to you as a member body, because they may not all see the opportunity in the same way. And it's a question of, how do you get this sort of vicious cycle started? And you're going to probably have to make an investment in it.
Yeah, I think, Joseph, just to add on to that, I think we have to mobilize our memberships, to genuinely make the contribution the profession can make to sustainability, understanding in business, and then reporting and assurance that go with that. I think we can equip our members with the understanding and the skills and the attributes that are going to make them very effective. They have that foundation, that Barry was just describing, and it does provide a future. But it does take a lot of work. And in terms of capability internally, within organisations, I think and this goes back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of how are we going to deliver, what is going to be the operating model, how are we going to attract talent into our organisations. Actually, working in this area is a way to get some of the best talent available if they can see a tangible outcome from that. And so, I think we have to provide really interesting and meaningful opportunities for people to deliver something different into this space and into the profession. And we've been, those of us, many people here involved in the integrated reporting movement, or whether it's been the accounting standards boards, etc. We've been talking about this for a long time, but it feels like the moment is absolutely right to make that push. and our members are much more receptive than they've ever been to change and understanding that need to upskill and pursue a different path. So I think it comes back to the members. There are hundreds, millions of them between our professional bodies. And I think we can make a huge difference to business outcomes by pursuing that.
From our side, the one message that we are driving with our members is their willingness to be able to unlearn all the other things that not necessarily leave all of them behind, but to learn new things. And we have provided the opportunity in collaboration with the IRC locally, mainly driven by Professor King, to give them an opportunity to move into the integrated thinking and integrated reporting space, which is more about the value creation than just the old way of just being one functional dimension. So it's more in our members being open to explore more competencies beyond what they currently have, and the opportunities are there, and it's going to happen through collaboration. We are not just going to move from this side to the other side. And our working with Mervyn King is actually working out quite well in the sustainability space.
If you remember, I show you a slide of the production of climate is a financial concern. So that was a production of our think tank. And we also had a survey under our members, how many of them are actually involved with sustainability reporting or auditing at the moment. And that was quite shocking. Only less than 10% of our members were actually involved with sustainability reporting nowadays. If they are accountants in business, you expect them to have some kind of sustainability reporting. It's not that much. But half of them, 50%, were actually interested and expect to become involved in sustainability reporting and auditing in the near future. So for us now, awareness, making our members aware of what's coming up, is our number one goal in sustainability.
Preferably, you don't need to have a burning platform, so like an organizational failure or sometimes that's what kickstarts that kind of change, but preferably you wouldn't be in that place. I think strategy and vision and having everybody aligned to that then allows the operational and governance changes to follow on behind. So I think bringing the outside in, ensuring that there is that really clear connection with what's happening in the market, in the profession, in the businesses and practices and the public sector where all our members work. I think that really helps shop, because I think the worst possible thing is navel gazing in professional bodies, if I can put it that way. You know, the kind of internal wranglings that you know become very petty and destructive and dysfunctional. You know, constantly rising above that to say, okay, what are we going to deliver? What is the public value? I think then you have enthusiasm. You know, you need enthusiasm and commitment and buy-in to change. And that does involve sometimes people sacrificing long-held, you know, personal positions or in an organization or structures that you've had to, literally for centuries in many organizations have to be challenged and changed. But they will change if people have a sense of that vision, excitement and contribution that can be made. So very so I think it can be done in a very positive and engaging fashion if you bring the outside in. I
would add that and this would be to the chief executives, you know, on this call. You have to think like a corporate. You have, you know, in a corporate world, and if we think about the largest firms in this world, they have evolved from operating as truly partnership structures to operating not completely like corporates, but much less so in an environment of a traditional partnership. And they've had to evolve in order to be successful, to grow, to be positioned better in the marketplace. The same thing is true for us. And we've had this debate at IFAC, a strong CEO-led organization. You have to, as the CEO, if you think like corporate, you have the responsibility for strategy and delivery on that. The board has the responsibility to approve that strategy or potentially change that strategy, but it's you that has to bring it to the table. And if we think about our organizations of saying we're only going to move when the majority of our members agree on an issue, and if you think about traditional adoption curves, you will become less and less relevant to the leading players of our profession. And if you become less relevant to the leaders, the most innovative, the most progressive in our profession, then you actually get into a vicious negative cycle. And you have to break that cycle. You have to think of yourself strategically as being relevant to the most innovative. And then as part of being innovative and agile, also find ways to bring along the masses in the middle of an adoption curve. And so that requires you to act like a CEO of a listed company or for-profit company, because that CEO has that obligation to bring that strategy to the board, to be aware of what that strategy should be, and then to execute on it.
One of the discussions that we keep on having at our EXCO is what else is still coming around the corner that we are not seeing, and we would never want to find ourselves in the situation where we found ourselves 4 years back when all the scandals hit. And if there's anything that helped us in getting buy-in, is basically making the powers that be and our members see the impact of not changing. And if there's any lesson we learned from the scandals was, if we are not to change and we want to remain who we are, the impact is going to be even more dire than what we have seen in the last 4 years. And that is sort of like eased more of the discussions, even without members and them taking it upon themselves to actually realize we need to change. And yeah, so the discussion has been more of what the change should be rather than we need to change.
To add a serious point here, because this is really in discussion in the Netherlands, I agree with Barry that as the CEO, you have to take the lead and even guide the board into new areas and producing public value. But we are not a firm. Our members are not clients. We have a lot of our members who are asking, what do I get in return for my fee? And we try to change that. You're a member of an association. We ask you to contribute financially and professionally, help your colleagues with developing knowledge. It is not a price you pay for services. That was our classical 2.0 position. Let's serve our members. Now it's let's serve society by being an innovative profession. So members who only want return for their fee are not having the right position. It's like Kennedy said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your colleagues, for your profession?
I agree with Robert. So, but my point is that to adopt this change management and to expand our market or increase our revenue, we need to diversify our, these degree giving professions. So, for instance, now there is a huge market in blockchain technology that can adopt any other supply chain and cryptocurrency and the things like that use blockchain technology. Why can't we offer this auditing or financial analysis on this blockchain thing? So we need to diversify our services. We need to diversify our degrees that offer to public and our members. Not only just the CPA or not only just one stable degree. We have to diversify this kind of thing. For instance, CPA measured in blockchain technology, or CPA measured in public financial management, etc. So, in my opinion, we should focus on this market expansion. So, then we can talk about this change management and other things, I would say.